Hey guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and we are on section two, part three, because this is, like I said, a very, very dense memo, as you can tell. So let's continue. Patrick Westfall's connection to the crime scene. Much of what connects Patrick Westfall to the crime scene has been discussed in the section detailing what connected Brad Holder to the crime scene. To shorten, to shorten this section, the defense will numerically lay out both evidence previously discussed as well as a few other pieces of evidence that tie Westfall to the crime scene. Footnote 135. If the fact or piece of evidence that has been discussed in a previous section in the defense is not going to drop a footnote to reference, as currently the defense has 126 footnotes and believes the court may not appreciate duplicate footnotes to reference exhibits already discussed and attached to this memorandum, this will help shorten an already long memorandum. Friberto? 1. Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall were friends at least until late January 21st, 2017, as proven by Facebook photo previously attached. 2. However, according to Amber Holder and law enforcement monitoring Facebook posts between Holder and Westfall, a fight between Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall occurred sometime in February 2017 concerning a ritual gone bad in the woods near a creek. 3. In the Odin report, Brad Holder told Amber Holder that the person that murdered the girls was Patrick Westfall and his crew. 4. Furthermore, as referenced in the Odin report, Brad Holder, sorry, Brad Holder told Amber Holder that Patrick Westfall was dangerous and has powerful friends that will protect him, and that she, Amber Holder, needs to back off or he, Brad Holder, will not be able to protect her. 5. Brad Holder told law enforcement that Patrick Westfall has post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Uh, Footnote 136. An unredacted copy of report DNI-C112503 is attached here too and marked as Exhibit 37 and filed as confidential. 6. The video of the ritual in Fort Wayne that Forensi sent to Liggett, which has been attached as an exhibit, shows Brad Holder videotaping someone that looks like Patrick Westfall using his fingers to quote unquote mark a tree in the ceremony about the same height as the tree F was marked with Libby's blood, leaving a question of whether Patrick Westfall marked the tree F or the F tree in the same way that he marked the tree in the Fort Wayne ceremony video. 7. Patrick Westfall lives within a 7-minute drive of where the girls were murdered. Number 8. Johnny Messer and Brad Holder commonly hung out at the Monon High Bridge and in the woods around the Monon High Bridge. 137. Messer, October 23rd, 2018, videotaped interview that the defense just received September 8th, 2023. This can be heard at the 14:05 mark. 9. Patrick Westfall also admitted he knew the woods around Monon Trail very well. Footnote 138. DIN C00256. An unredacted copy is attached here too and marked as Exhibit 39, filed as confidential. 10. Patrick Westfall's Facebook post just 2 months before the girls were murdered shows Westfall cutting tree limbs into runes by slicing the tree limb with an electric saw, creating clean, smooth edges to the tree limb. 39. Find attached Exhibit 99, which is a Facebook post of Westfall cutting tree limbs into runes. 11. In that Facebook post, Brad Holder is commenting cutting runes with exclamation points. 12. At the crime scene, one of the tree limbs placed on Abby has its end cleanly sliced and smoothly sliced, similarly to the way Patrick Westfall is slicing tree limbs in Exhibit 98. Number 13. Westfall's alibi for February 13th, 2017 is that on the day of the abduction, he, Patrick Westfall, was at home with his son Nick. 14. There is no evidence that law enforcement knocked on doors to determine if Patrick Westfall was at home at the time, or any evidence that law enforcement walked around the neighborhood to see if any ring door cameras or any other type of cameras caught Westfall leaving the house. Law enforcement just believed Patrick Westfall. 15. Patrick Westfall was a pastor for a religion known as Astaru, which is a warrior type religion with many gods, including Odin and Thor. 40. Emphasis added. DNI C002561, previously marked as Exhibit 39, then filed as confidential. 16. Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder were both affiliated with Vinlanders Club or gang, along with Johnny Messer. 144. This information is contained in multiple places, such as DNI C00256, Exhibit 39, and in various points in Johnny Messer's October 23rd, 2018 videotaped statement that was only provided to the defense on September 8th. Unfortunately, the defense did not have time to cull the exact timestamps for those references, wanting to get this memo or motion in file, but can provide that to the court if necessary so the court does not have to watch the entire video. That's awful nice of them. See, and they thought they were being disrespectful to the court. Let's see. Number 17. On March 2nd, 2017, only 16 days after the girls were found murdered, Unified Command member Kevin Hammond indicated there was no lead required concerning Patrick Westfall, meaning no further need to investigate Patrick Westfall. Patrick Westfall's connection to the crime scene is connected to the crime scene in multiple ways. It is unknown if Brad Holder threw Patrick Westfall under the bus to Amber Holder to take the stink off himself, Brad Holder, or if Brad Holder knows that Patrick Westfall murdered those girls, then marked the tree like he did in the Fort Wayne ceremony. Either way, it cannot be understated that one single solitary softball interview between law enforcement and Patrick Westfall is disgraceful, considering everything listed above links Westfall to the crimes. Let's repeat that. It appears that Westfall was interviewed one time on February 19th, 2017. And we know that this is one of the interviews that has been recorded over, so we will never know exactly what was said. 2 weeks later, on March 2nd, 2017, Westfall is eliminated as a suspect. The defense is unaware of any search warrants requested on Patrick Westfall to determine whether this Astaro pastor had taken clothes off of Abby or Libby as ceremonial keepsakes, or even if he'd saved Abby's blood. By looking at the 5-paragraph report generated from the only interview of Patrick Westfall, it looks like law enforcement did nothing but lob softball questions at Patrick Westfall, rather than conducting an intense interrogation the way citizens would expect for someone that the evidence shows is so closely related to the crimes. Johnny Messer's connection to the crime and crime scenes. As has been previously stated or discussed, Johnny Messer was close with Brad Holter and Patrick Westfall and knew Elvis Fields, Ned Smith, and Rod Abrams. 42. And this comes from his interview at the 1405 mark and the 1417 mark. Furthermore, as previously discussed, Johnny Messer was a recruiter for Vinlander. See footnotes 98 and 99. Also, as previously stated, Ned Smith, Rod Abrams, and Elvis Fields all hoped to join the Vinlander Club, according to Johnny Messer. Around Valentine's 2017, Johnny Messer went up there to Delphi to hang out with his Vinlander's buddies. See Odin Report, page 5. As stated earlier, Patrick Westphal claimed to be at home on Delphi on February 13th, 2017, and Brad Holder claimed to be in Logansport on February 13th, 2017. Therefore, if Johnny Messer was going up there to visit his Vinlander buddies, Johnny Messer, would be going to Delphi to spend some time with Westphal, who, like Messer's brother, or possibly to Logansport to visit Holder. When Messer came back from being in Delphi around Valentine's Day, the vehicle he drove up to Delphi had blood along the side of the vehicle, and he and Messer had no explanation for the blood's existence. Taylor Hornaday had to go to the car wash several times to clean off the vehicle. Odin Report, page 6. Evidence shows that the recruiter, Johnny Messer, was the connective tissue between the Delphi crew and the Rushville crew. Unified Command overlooked these connections, and furthermore, Liggett failed to inform Judge Diner of these connections to the murder scene. Rod Abrams' connection to the crime scene. Rod Abrams told police a lie about his whereabouts on February 13th, 2017. This was discussed and referenced in Elvis's section, as was the fact that Elvis's alibi conflicted with Rob Abrams. Rod Abrams here other excuse me. Here are a few other evidentiary nuggets picked up from the defense review of Rod Abrams' February 27th, 2018 interview that prosecution just provided to the defense on September 8th, 2023. The defense has had very little time to review voluminous amount of discovery dumped on the defense September 8th, 2023, including hours upon hours of never-before-seen videos. Therefore, the defense will do its best to detail the important aspects of Rod Abrams' video reference to the mark, daggone it, with reference to the mark in the video where the words are spoken. Some of these evidentiary nuggets from Rod Abrams' videotaped interview incriminate Elvis Fields. 1. Elvis had been working for Ned Smith since 2005, but stopped working for Ned in 2017, the same years as the murders. 5:15 mark of video 1. 2. According to Rod Abrams, Elvis was communicating with a 12-year-old girl on the internet and discussing inappropriate things. 12:07 mark of Rod Abrams' video marked Exhibit 100. 3. Elvis used Facebook to communicate with girls ages 13, 14, and 15, found at the 13:45 mark on Rod Abrams' second video marked as Exhibit 101. When law enforcement asked Rod, quote, "Has he, Elvis, ever talked about doing anything to a couple of girls?" There was a long pause. Then Rod Abrams finally said, "No." The law enforcement officer then said, "Are you sure?" Rod Rod responded, "He's never, I mean, he has, I mean." The law enforcement officer then says, "You kind of hesitated when I asked you that." 15:07 mark of Abrams' second video. 5. When Rod Abrams is asked if Ned Smith and Elvis will also say they were in Muncie, they were all in Muncie on February 13, 2017, Rod Abrams doesn't answer the question, but after another long pause tells a long rambling story about how Ned doesn't always remember things. 9:30 mark on Rod Abrams' video number 2. 6. Finally, law enforcement asked Rod if they can look at Rod's phone to see any text between Rod and Elvis. Rod, refuses, claiming that Elvis no longer has his phone number after Rod changed phones. 9 of Rod Abrams' third video marked as Exhibit 102. 7. According to Johnny Messer, Rod Abrams, along with Elvis and Ned Smith, were all interested in joining Messer's and Holder's Vinlanders Club. The lies about Elvis's alibi should have been especially alarming to Unified Command. However, the items enumerated of all should cause Unified Command to pause about above should cause Unified Command to pause about Rod Abrams and Elvis Field's involvement in the murders. Conclusion of Part 2. Part 2 was dense with information. However, the court should be able to see that Tony Liggett knew about the obvious connection between Odinism and the murders, specifically the connection to Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, and Johnny Messer, Elvis Fields, and Rod Abrams based on the evidence provided to the court. The fact that a mystery Purdue professor purportedly led Unified Command off the scent of the Odinites is preposterous. Additionally, according to Todd Click's affidavit, the FBI Cold Case Unit determined that Odinites were involved in the murders, but Unified Command did nothing to investigate the Odinites. Unified Command seemingly rebuffed the Rushville investigators, Forensi, Murphy, and Click, who believed, based upon a large collection of evidence, that Holder, Westfall, Fields, Messers, and Abrams were all involved. Leggett's concealment of this Odinite information from Judge Diner was intentional or reckless or both. So I think I am going to go ahead and add this next section to this, since that I didn't realize there was such little left. Part 3. Liggett concealed and falsified evidence in his affidavit for search warrant. The concealed and falsified evidence blows Leggett's timeline apart, which explains why he concealed and falsified information. For Leggett's timeline to work and place Richard Allen on the Monon High Bridge at 2:13, the time of the infamous quote unquote down the hill video, Liggett desperately needed Betsy Blair to describe a man on Monon High Bridge that looked like Richard Allen, and perhaps more importantly, needed Betsy Blair to describe a car that she observed park at the CPS parking lot at approximately 2:15 p.m. as looking like Richard Allen's black Ford Focus. Betsy Blair's description of the man she observed on the Monon High Bridge around 2 p.m. looked nothing like Richard Allen. Liggett concealed this information from Judge Diner. Betsy Blair's description of the vehicle she observed at the CPS parking lot looked nothing like a black Ford Focus. Liggett concealed this information from Judge Diner. For good measure, Liggett also lied about what Sarah Carball observed at 3:57 p.m. that also blew up his timeline. Betsy Blair's first description of the man she saw on the bridge was memorialized in sketch number 2, illustrated on February 17th, 2017, 3 days after the girls were found, but not released to the public until April 22nd, 2019, following Superintendent Doug Carter's press release. On February 17th, 2017, Betsy Blair met with police sketch artist Taylor D. Bryant, and provided the description of a man she observed from 50 feet away on the Monon High Bridge. The same man Liggett claimed in his affidavit was the killer. Betsy Blair told the sketch artist that the man Betsy Blair observed was a white male, age 20, had brown curly hair, medium build. Find attached and marked as Exhibit 103, the unredacted facial identification reference sheet filed as confidential that contains the description Betsy Blair provided to the sketch artist. Also find attached a copy of the sketch Taylor D. Bryant produced from Betsy Blair's description of the man she observed on the bridge, marked as Exhibit 104. This illustration is also called Sketch 2 because it was released to the public second. Upon looking at the sketch, Betsy Blair told the sketch artist that the illustration was a 10 out of 10 for accuracy. Footnote 144. Blair's 10 out of 10 comment is memorialized in a report identified as incident number 17 0091 S03. This is a 10 out of 10. Wording can be found in the second full paragraph. Find attached unredacted report marked Exhibit 105. Unified Command did not release the Betsy Blair sketch to the public for over 2 years. Instead, they first released this Sarah Carbaugh sketch, also called sketch number 1 because it was released to the public first. The Sarah Carbaugh sketch was illustrated by FBI sketch artist Plants from Detroit on June 19th, 2017, and was released to the public on July 17th, 2017. Who was the person that Sarah Carbaugh was describing in her sketch? According to Liggett's affidavit, at approximately 3:57 p.m., Sarah Carbaugh observed a man walking westbound on County Road 300 North. Sarah Carbaugh was heading eastbound on County Road 300 North, operating her motor vehicle while simultaneously observing this man walking on the road toward her on the opposite side of the road. This is the same man that Sarah Carbaugh described for a sketch artist on June 19th, 2017. We will be discussing Sarah Carbaugh's description of that man later. Roughly 2 years later, in March 2019, Betsy Blair met with Tony Liggett, frustrated that her sketch number 2, had not been released to the public. For footnote 46 or 146, see Exhibit 105, incident number 17-0091-S03, last sentence of second paragraph. Betsy was frustrated because sketch number 1, which had been released to the public almost 2 years ago, did not match the man that Betsy Blair, had observed on the high bridge. Betsy even commented that sketch 1 was quote unquote wrong. S Footnote 47, see attached flash drive containing Betsy Blair's March 7th, 2019 interview with Tony Liggett, marked as Exhibit 107. Betsy Blair states that sketch 1 with the golf hat is wrong at 11:37, 55 mark. Certainly, it was odd that Sarah Carbaugh's sketch was chosen to be released over Betsy Blair's sketch for the following reason. Betsy Blair provided her description to the sketch artist only 4 days after seeing the man on the bridge, while it was fresh on her mind, compared to Sarah Carbaugh, who provided her description to the sketch artist 126 days after Carbaugh observed the man on the road. Betsy Blair had a good look at the man's face while stationary from only 50 feet away. 148. Ligette's affidavit marked as Exhibit 108, also Exhibit 107 at the 11:42:10 mark. Sarah Carbaugh was not stationary, but rather traveling down the road, operating her vehicle simultaneously, trying to observe the man on the road. Uh, 49, Ligette's affidavit search for a search warrant. Betsy Blair had a good look at the man's face during her March 7th, 2017 interview. Betsy Blair was talking with 2 members of Unified Command, Kevin Hammond and Tony Liggett. At this interview, Betsy Blair told Lizette face to face that the man she, Betsy Blair, observed on the High Bridge fit the following description. The man was slender and youthful looking. He was more boyish looking. The man was in his 20s to 30s. His hair seemed poofy, just as in the sketch portrayed. He had no facial hair that she can remember. Uh, Footnote 150, Exhibit 107 at the 11:42:10 mark. Finally, on April 22nd, 2019, Unified Command released Betsy Blair's second or sketch number 2 to the general public. In fact, upon its release, Superintendent Doug Carter commented the man in sketch 2 or in sketch 1 had now become secondary and sketch 2 was responsible for the murders. On March 7th, 2019, Liggett was present when Betsy Blair described the man she observed on the bridge. Betsy was actually talking to Liggett face to face when she provided the description. 53. See Exhibit 107, Blair's March 7th, 2019 interview. Liggett heard Betsy's description of a much younger man with brown, poofy hair, but chose to conceal this information from Judge Diner. Blair's description of a youthful, boyish looking person in his 20s, maybe even 30s, with poofy brown hair, obviously does not at all describe Richard Allen, 54. Find attached a videotaped interview of Richard Allen marked as Exhibit 10 or 110. This will provide an image of Richard Allen. In order for Liggett to have provided Judge Diner with an honest, accurate uh, information, he would have had to state the following in his affidavit. I, Tony Liggett, believe Richard Allen is the man that murdered the girls for reasons stated herein. I also believe the man Betsy Blair observed on the bridge is Richard Allen, and therefore the killer. However, I must inform the court that the man Betsy Blair observed on the bridge really looks nothing like Richard Allen, whereas Richard Allen was a man in his mid-40s with short or even shaved grayish hair. Again, you'll see a description of how Richard Allen would have looked from the footnote in 55 and the exhibit 111. The man Betsy Blair described was, quote, youthful, boyish looking, and with brown, poofy hair. Also, Your Honor, Betsy Blair told the sketch artist that the man she saw on the bridge was just 20 years old. This description came only 4 days after she observed the man on the bridge. 2 years later, Betsy Blair still maintains that the man was in his 20s or maybe early 30s. Also, excuse me. Also, Betsy Blair told the sketch artist back in 2017 the resemblance of the boyish sketch to the man she observed on the bridge was a 10 out of 10. I must tell you, Judge, that this is 10 out of 10 sketch looks absolutely nothing like Richard Allen. Liggett had a legal obligation to inform Judge Diner of the vast differences between Betsy Blair's description of the man she observed on the bridge and Richard Allen. He did not. The fact alone should be sufficient enough to merit a tossing of the warrant and suppress the fruits of an illegal search. However, there's more. In order for Liggett's timeline to work, he needs Richard Allen's black Ford Focus to be parked at the CPS lot from 1:30 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. Betsy Blair sees one car at the CPS lot at 2:15 p.m., and it is not Richard Allen's car. Richard Allen voluntarily was interviewed on October 13th, 2022. Watching that videotaped interview, it was apparent that Richard thought he was being questioned to help assist the police in solving the crime in trying to provide Leggett and Mullen a timeline of when he, Richard Allen, was at the trail. Richard stated he arrived to the trail at noon. 57. Exhibit 110, Richard Allen tells Leggett and prosecutor investigator Mullins that the from the prosecutor that he had arrived around noon at the 10:57 mark. And find attached the earlier footnote 156 that I missed somehow was, Richard Allen does not realize he's being interrogated as a suspect until much later in the interview. So he thought he was helping the cops. Never help the cops without your lawyer, y'all. Never. Later in the interview, Richard Allen told Leggett and Mullen he probably left the trail around 1:30 p.m. 158, Exhibit 110 around the 11:53:43 mark. In his affidavit, Leggett states that Richard Allen parked his black Ford Focus at the CPS parking lot, then cut over to the trail where he, Richard Allen, then walked to the high bridge, ultimately following Abby and Libby across the bridge before abducting them. 59, both 59 and 160 are Leggett's affidavit. After murdering the girls, Leggett states in his affidavit that Betsy Carball observed a man that Leggett claims is Richard Allen walking along 300 North at approximately 3:57 p.m. westbound toward the CPS parking lot. The implication being that Richard Allen was walking back to his car after abducting and murdering the girls. If what Leggett wrote in his affidavit were true, then Richard Allen's black Ford Focus would have been in the parking lot from 1:30 p.m. till at least 4 p.m., giving him time to abduct the girls, murder the girls, then walk back to his Ford Focus parked at the CPS parking lot sometime after 3:57 p.m. when Sarah Carball observed Richard walking down 300 North. In other words, for Legette's timeline to work, Richard Allen's black Ford Focus would have to have remained in the parking lot at the old CPS building from roughly 1:30 p.m. when Leggett claims Richard Allen arrived until roughly 4 p.m. after Leggett claims Richard Allen had abducted and murdered the girls. If Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was not at that CPS parking lot between the hours of 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m., then Leggett's timeline would be blown. In his deposition, Leggett was asked a series of questions by defense counsel, and Leggett answered those questions as followed. Is your contention that Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was parked at the old CPS building at 1:29 roughly p.m. on February 13th, 2007 or 2017? Answer yes. Is it your contention that Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was parked at the old CPS building at 1:45 p.m. on February 13th? Yes. Is it your contention that Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was parked at the old CPS building at 2 p.m. on February 13th? Yes. Is your contention that Richard Allen's so this goes on and on until 4 p.m. or until 4:30. So basically what they get out of him is that he is definitely, all there all the time until around 4 p.m. Throughout his answers, Leggett demonstrated he recognized that for his timeline to work, Richard Allen's black Ford Focus would have to be parked at the CPS lot from 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. in order to give Richard Allen the time to abduct and murder the girls and return to his vehicle. Therefore, if there was any evidence that Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was not parked in the old CPS parking lot between those times, that is something that he, Liggett, would be required to share with Judge Diner. Rather than tell the truth, Liggett concealed evidence that Richard's black Ford Focus left the CPS parking lot approximate by probably at 1:30 p.m., but certainly before 2:15 p.m. when Blair saw a completely different car there, and therefore Richard Allen could not have been on the bridge at 2 p.m. or committed the murders soon thereafter. For starters, as noted earlier in his interview with Leggett and Mullen, Richard Allen stated that Richard Allen, arrived at the trails around noon and left around 1:30 p.m. Leggett failed to inform Judge Diner that Richard Allen stated he left the trails at 1:30 p.m. He should have, especially if there was evidence that a different vehicle was parked at the old CPS lot after 1:30 p.m., but before 4 p.m., which would have then supported Richard Allen's statement that Richard Allen, left the CPS building around 1:30 p.m. So the next question to ask is, did anyone see a vehicle parked at the old CPS building between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. that did not resemble Richard Allen's black Ford Focus, thus supporting the timeline that Richard Allen provided Leggett, but which Leggett concealed from Judge Diner? The answer is yes. Betsy Blair. When Betsy Blair arrived at the trail roughly at 1:46 p.m., Betsy Blair had parked her vehicle in a different location that defense calls Mears parking lot. When she left the Monon Trail and pulled out of Mears parking lot, Betsy Blair headed west on 300 North in her car and was spotted on the Hoosier Harvest camera heading toward the old CPS lot at 2:14 p.m. The old CPS lot is only a 36-second drive from Hoosier Harvest store camera. 61 from an affidavit uh, from a member of Richard's defense team, Matt Hoffman, who paced the distance from the Hoosier Harvest store to the CPS lot. It takes approximately 36 seconds. Affidavit marked as Exhibit 111, I believe. No, 112, sorry. Giving Betsy Blair a full minute to drive from Hoosier Harvest to the old CPS lot would mean that Betsy Blair would pass the old CPS lot around 2:15 p.m. Remember that Leggett has admitted under oath that at 2:15 p.m., Richard Allen's black Ford Focus would be parked at the old CPS building while Richard Allen, was abducting and unaliving the girls. However, at 2:15 p.m., when Betsy Blair passed the old CPS building, Betsy Blair did not see a black Ford Focus parked at the old CPS lot. The car that Betsy Blair observed as she passed the old CPS building at 2:15 p.m. looked nothing like the black Ford Focus. According to Leggett's own report, Betsy Blair observed one car parked at the CPS lot at 2:15. The car resembled a quote 1965 Ford Comet, end quote, that her father had once owned. The shape had sharper angles. Uh, the defense recognizes that in 1965, the Ford did not make a comet, uh, Mercury did, but these are the words of Betsy Blair, who knew that what the comet looked like, but erroneously thought that Ford produced the comet. Leggett report was previously entered as Exhibit 105, paragraphs 4 and 6 on page 1. Betsy even provided a sketch of the side profile of the car she observed at the CPS lot at 2:15 p.m., featuring the angles that the car possessed. Blair's sketch of the side profile of the car attached hereto and marked Exhibit 113. The sketch definitely looks nothing like the side profile of Richard Allen's Ford Focus. A photo of a Ford Focus, similar to the one owned by Richard Allen in 2017, is attached and marked as Exhibit 114. Again, to whom did Betsy Blair provide this description of a 1965 Ford Comet-looking angular appearance vehicle? None other than Liggett himself. Liggett was fully aware that the car Betsy Blair described as being backed into a spot at the old CPS building looked nothing like Richard Allen's black Ford Focus, but Liggett concealed that information from Judge Diner. It should be noted that if Richard Allen left at 1:30 p.m., then the person that Betsy Blair observed on the High Bridge at roughly 2 p.m. was not Richard Allen. This would explain why the person that Betsy Blair observed on the High Bridge looked nothing like Richard Allen, because it wasn't Richard Allen. It was a 20-year-old kid with poofy hair. Concealing Betsy Blair's description of the vehicle at the old CPS uh, building from Judge Diner may have temporarily plugged a hole in the dam of Ligette's problematic timeline when Diner reviewed the affidavit on October 13th, 2022, but Ligette's concealment has now been exposed. And it gets worse. When I asked to describe the color of the car that resembles a 1965 Ford Comet, Betsy Blair actually told Liggett, or when asked to describe the color of the car that resembles a 1964 Ford Comet, Betsy Blair actually told Liggett that the car she saw was not black. That's right. Liggett heard from the mouth of Betsy Blair that the 1965 Ford Comet-looking vehicle was not even black, which is the color that Liggett needed the vehicle to be in order to fit the description of Richard's black Ford Focus, described in Ligette's affidavit. Because of Betsy's description of the car she viewed at the old CPS building, evidence supports that Richard Allen left at 1:30 p.m., as he told Liggett. At some point in time after Richard left the old CPS lot, an older angular-looking car that resembled a 1965 Comet and was not black arrived at the old CPS building. Then the driver of this 1965 Ford Comet looking angular non-black vehicle backed into the CPS parking lot. At roughly 2:15 p.m., when returning home, Betsy Blair observed this car that reminded her of a car her father had owned growing up. All of this adds up to this fact. Evidence concealed by Liggett supports that Richard Allen was not at the crime scene, as he had already left at 1:30 p.m. and was home by the time Betsy Blair observed the 1965 Ford Comet-looking non-black vehicle at the CPS parking lot. Liggett knew, and again, because Betsy Blair's description of the vehicle she observed at the old CPS building, evidence supports that Richard Allen was home by the time Betsy Blair saw the 20-year-old with poofy hair on the bridge, which again explains why the person on the bridge looks nothing like Richard Allen, because it wasn't Richard Allen. This is simply outrageous and abusive behavior on the part of Liggett, abusive in that Liggett used his power as a law enforcement officer to conceal evidence to secure a search warrant 26 days before an election in which he was running for sheriff. And at the burnt end of Ligette's abusive behavior is Richard Allen, who has been sitting and suffering in hell for over 10 months. Liggett doesn't even have the excuse that Betsy Blair provided the description to a different detective, and therefore he, Liggett, could not have known of Blair's distinguishing description, making it a simple administrative snafu that fell through the cracks. No, Liggett heard the description straight from the mouth of Betsy Blair, yet chose to conceal this timeline destroying evidence from Judge Diner. If Judge Diner had known that the evidence showed that Richard Allen was home by the time the girls were abducted at 2:13 p.m., Judge Diner would never have signed the search warrant. But that's not all, it gets worse. It gets worse. Liggett flat out lied when he told Judge Diner that in 2017, Sarah Carbaugh described a man as muddy, bloody, wearing clothing, also wearing a blue jacket. For Legette's timeline to work, not only did he, Leggett, need for Richard Allen's black Ford Focus to be parked at the old CPS parking lot between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m., but he also needed Sarah Carbaugh's statement concerning the man she claimed she saw walking westbound on 300 North at 3:57 p.m. to match Betsy Blair's description of a man wearing a blue jacket. It would also help if the man had blood on his clothing to further tie him to the murder. In his affidavit, Leggett wrote the following. An interview was done of Sarah Carbaugh in 2017. She states she was traveling east on 300 North and observed a male subject walking west on the north side of 300 North away from Monon Trail. She stated he was wearing a quote blue jacket, blue jeans, and was muddy and bloody. She further stated it appeared he had gotten into a fight. Investigators determined from the video that she was on 300 North at 15:57 hours. The blue jacket described by Sarah Carbaugh needed to be the color of the jacket described by Betsy Blair to help with Legette's timeline. Again, the blood on the clothing would be an added bonus so that it would tie the man that Sarah Carbaugh observed in with the murders and therefore assist Judge Diner in making the decision to write the warrant. The problem is that in 2017, Sarah Carbaugh told Leggett to his face that the man she observed walking on 300 North was wearing a tan colored, l- lighter colored coat, not a blue jacket. Find attached a flash drive containing Sarah Carbaugh's June 7, 2017 interview with Tony Leggett. It is marked as Exhibit 115. Carbaugh describes the man she observed as wearing a lighter colored coat at the 5:07:30 mark. This is a problem because the color of the man's coat did not match the coat of the 20-year-old boyish-looking man with the poofy brown hair Betsy Blair observed on the high bridge around 2 p.m. According to Leggett, both of these men are Richard Allen. Leggett Depot, page 50, lines 125, and page 151, lines 1 through 17. Another way to put it is that Leggett asserted that sketch 1 and sketch 2 are the exact same person, Richard Allen, 69. Remember, Leggett testified under oath that one man, Richard Allen, committed this crime. Therefore, if Betsy Blair observed one man while Sarah Carbaugh observed an entirely different second man, then this would cut against Legett's preposterous contention that only one man committed this crime. The fact is that perhaps neither the young man Betsy Blair observed nor the bloody the muddy man Sarah Carbaugh observed had anything to do with the murders. Meanwhile, as Blair and Carbaugh were observing these two different men, Richard Allen was at home and a 1975 Comet-looking uh, non-black vehicle was parked in the old CPS parking lot. Uh, The problem was that Carbaugh did not observe the man walking down 300. Sarah Carbaugh saw a man walking on 300 North wearing a jacket. Leggett needed the color of that jacket to match the color of the jacket worn by the man Betsy Blair had observed on the high bridge at 2 p.m. because Leggett is claiming that both men are the same man, Richard Allen. The problem was that Carbaugh did not observe the man walking down 300 North wearing a blue jacket. She observed a tan jacket. This meant that Sarah Carball and Betsy Blair observed two different men. This creates a problem for Ligette's timeline, so instead of being honest, Liggett chose to represent to Judge Diner that Carball observed a man wearing a blue jacket when in her 2017 interview, Carball said it was tan, but that's not all. Nowhere in Sarah Carball's 2017 interview does Sarah Carball use the word bloody to describe the clothing she saw the man wearing. Nowhere. Underline, italicized, mark with a big old, you know, the so-called muddy, bloody lady is just the muddy lady, as Carball only used the word muddy to describe the man she observed on 300 North in her 2017 interview. It would certainly help Judge Diner in making his decision if the man walking down the street was wearing a blue jacket and also wearing bloody clothing, as if he just murdered someone. However, Liggett just flat out lied. Sarah Carball never mentioned a blue jacket and never mentioned blood in her 2017 interview. Instead of lying, had Liggett told Judge Diner that the man walking down 300 North at 3:57 p.m. was wearing a light tan-colored coat instead of a blue coat, then Judge Diner would have had to realize that Betsy Blair and Sarah Carball did not see the same man. Instead of lying, had Liggett told Judge Diner that the man walking down 300 North only had muddy clothing, then Judge Diner would not have associated that man with murder. Again, Liggett did not can't claim that when drafting the affidavit, Liggett relied on false description provided by a different investigator. No, Sarah Carball told Liggett to his face that the man she observed was wearing a tan coat and was only muddy, not bloody. If Judge Diner had been told the truth, he would not have, nor should not have, signed a warrant. Conclusion of Part 3. There is a reason that in his sworn affidavit, Liggett concealed key information from Judge Diner and lied about other key information. Had Diner known the hidden and falsified facts, then Diner never would have signed the search warrant. A search warrant that was already insufficient in linking Richard Allen to the murders even before Liggett's lies and deceptions. Liggett concealed and falsified evidence that would have told a completely different story had Liggett not concealed evidence and lied about evidence. Richard Allen told Liggett to his face he, Allen, left the old CPS parking lot by 1:30, but Liggett opted not to tell Judge Diner now now about what Richard had said. When Richard Allen drove away from the old CPS parking lot at 1:30 to go home, at some point in time before 1:15 p.m., a person driving a car that resembled a 1965 Comet, angular in shape, not black, backed their car into the old CPS parking lot and parked. Then at 2:15 p.m., Betsy Blair drove past the old CPS parking lot, observed the car, and remembered what it looked like because it reminded her of her youth, a car that her dad drove in the 1960s. Because Richard Allen had left the CPS parking lot at or before 1:30 p.m., it certainly explains why the man Betsy Blair observed at the High Bridge at 2 p.m. was a boyish, youthful-looking 20 to 30-year-old man with poofy brown hair that looked nothing like Richard Allen because it wasn't Richard Allen, as Richard Allen had left for home at half an hour earlier. There is a reason that the man that Sarah Carball observed on 300 North at 3:57 was not wearing a blue coat like the man Betsy Blair observed on the High Bridge, the same man that Liggett claims was Richard Allen, because the man that Sarah Carball observed on 300 North at 3:57 p.m. wasn't the same man that Betsy Blair saw on the bridge at 2 p.m. It was a completely different man, and that that had mud, not blood, on his clothing. Betsy Blair saw one man, perhaps the same man that Riley Voorhees, Bree Wilbur, and Anna Spauth saw on the trail. Sarah Carbaugh observed a completely different man, and while all these witnesses were observing two men, Richard Allen was at home where he had been since leaving the Monon Trail before 1:30 p.m. That is the difference the concealed and falsified evidence would have made for Judge Diner. So there you guys go. That is the end of part 2 and part 3 for you. Because holy fazolies, this is well, we are getting closer. We are on page 118. We are getting going there. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This is tense, this is infuriating, and it's saddening, really. I mean, no matter where you fall on this, if you think, maybe there is a part where Richard Allen could have done this, or there's no way Richard Allen could have done this, or I'd like to wait and see. It doesn't seem like the cops gave a good old damn what they were doing, and it kinda pisses me off a whole lot. Anyhoozle, I will see you guys later. Thank you, and I will start working on part 4, if you can believe it. Bye, guys.